Hi, I'm Rashonda. I'm the creator of ArtByRow.com, where I help hobby artists grow by teaching them how to focus on the process rather than the outcome. I specialize in developing creativity, creating more art in less time, and using graffiti art to generate ideas instead of always wondering what you should be working on. If this sounds like something you'd be interested in, subscribe so you get notified whenever new videos get uploaded. Now let's head on over to the art studio and do some drawings. We're going to work on today's tutorial together. Let's head on over. So today we're going to draw a graffiti spray can. It's just those little animated paint spray cans that you see a lot of times in the graffiti style artwork. And these are they're pretty easy to make. They're not too difficult. They look more difficult than they actually are. And it's always easier to break things down into basic shapes. And we're going to make this 3D, so we're going to use forms. And forms are just the 3D version of shape. So the form we're going to use is a cylinder. So if you think about the concept of how you would draw a cylinder and how a cylinder would look, you want to keep that in mind when you're drawing it. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. You might want to sketch them out on a piece of scrap paper first, or some drawing paper, a sketchbook. Just do some quick sketches to come up with some different ideas. But basically what you want to do is think about how this is going to look as far as your cylinder. So you can start by making a rectangle just to kind of get an idea of how it's going to be positioned on your paper, where everything's gonna be at. And you want to do this real lightly because we're gonna make some changes. We're gonna sort of sketch it out, rough it out real quick, but then we're going to add the details and change it up and make it a little more interesting looking. So you want to make sure you're always sketching real light on your paper. So what I want to do with this one, I got my rectangle, but I want to make it 3D. So here's the cap. The cap's going to be up here. That's your little spray nozzle. And we're going to be kind of looking at this one from underneath. But let's go ahead and get the basic shape of this sketched out. So I want this to come around here. And we're going to make it so it's kind of like crushed a little bit. Make it a little more animated. So we're going to bend this around. Have this come around this way. And again, we're going to keep refining it. Sketch it out. And keep making changes as we need to. So as I'm doing this, I can see that, and you can erase if you need to, or if the extra lines don't bother you, you can leave them there. I want to bring this down a little bit further. I have some room here on my card, and I'm doing this on an artist trading card. I tend to do a lot of my work on artist trading cards so I can put them in my portfolio and then trade them as I get that urge to get involved in the online trading. So we're going to be looking at the bottom of the can. So we want to keep that in mind. And then I want to make some, like I said earlier, I want it to look like it's kind of like it's crushed a little bit. I'm going to draw a ring around the bottom. Yeah, the spray cans have the caps on the tops and the bottoms. And there's a lot of different ways you can try drawing this. Add different types of details. You really want to experiment with your artwork and try different things and see what works, what doesn't work, what types of things you like, what you don't like. So we're going to put this little bend in here. and maybe do something similar on the other side. But I also don't want to match it exactly, but we want it to look like it's animated, like it's, you know, like it's a little bit of a character. We're making a spray can character basically, so you want to make sure it feels animated. And these kind of look like, they end up looking like cheekbones coming out. So now I'm going to go ahead and put that cap on the top, the ring around the top of the spray can. And if you have room, you can put, there's sort of a dome on the top of it. And then we're going to have the nozzle coming up here. And you can make this a little more stylized too if you want. That's up to you. I think the more stylized you can make your artwork, the more fun it is. It's both for the viewer and for the artist making it. If you can stylize it a little bit more, I think it's more enjoyable. I want to make this a little bit wider. Round that off right there. And then you can also do, like these nozzles on the actual spray cans will have those little ridges in it for like the little grips on them. You can add that. It's up to you how much detail you want to put into it. And again, this, you know, it's just a little fun drawing. Do something different. It's always fun to take, you know, everyday objects and make them animated. So that's the design of the can, and you could leave it as just that if you wanted to, or you can put a face on it. And I think it's to put the faces on it, it's a little more fun. It makes it a little more animated, a little more of a character, kind of crazy looking. So you need to figure out, you might have to shorten up some of your details here to fit the face in, or if you want to, you can draw it around those to make it part of the actual creases in the damage of your can if you got it kind of crushed looking. So I'm going to draw the mouth. And again, don't be afraid to do something a little different than what you would normally do. You don't necessarily have to do things in your standard way. Go ahead and always, you should be experimenting, playing around with things, having fun. So I'm just kind of putting in some indication of where the eyes are going to go, just to give me something to follow, a little bit of a guide. And when you're drawing your eyes and drawing them out, there are so many different ways that you could do them. And it's entirely up to you what kind of look you want it to have, what kind of personality you want your can to have. And again, you can add as much or as little detail. You can go crazy. You could make it really simplified. It's entirely up to you. And all these different details are going to change the overall look and feel of your finished artwork. So that's it for the sketch. And you could put a nose on here or not put a nose on there. I kind of like it without the nose. So that's it for the sketch. And now we're going to move on to the outline. Okay, so for the outline, I like using these Sharpie pens. And this is just a black medium point Sharpie pen. And I like the way these look because a lot of the markers tend to bleed into the paper. Like I said earlier, I'm doing this on an artist trading card, which I cut out of cardstock. I make my own cards. They're really easy to make, and if you do it a certain way, you can get 10 blank cards out of one sheet of cardstock. And what I do is I cut out a couple sheets and I have a stack of blank cards on my desk. And then whenever I'm ready to draw something, I just grab a card and I'm ready to go. And the reason I do the artist trading cards is because, number one, the biggest reason is they're a huge time saver. I used to do everything in sketchbooks, and I like doing them in sketchbooks, but one thing is, for the amount of time that they take, by the time I get something done halfway, 3/4 of the way through completing it, I tend to lose interest and I start thinking about other things I want to do, and I would tend to abandon, I guess you would say, my drawings and my artwork, because I think just because I lose interest, or I don't know if it just started to feel overwhelming or what the exact reasoning was. But I spent years not finishing any of my artwork and having tons and tons of sketchbooks that are filled with half-completed drawings in them. And I think the reason, or what I've discovered, is that the biggest reason for that is I think they were just too big and they were too much of a time commitment. So several years ago, I had taken a pretty long break from creating artwork. And when I got back into it, I didn't have a lot of time because my day job at that time, I worked a ridiculous amount of hours, and I honestly didn't have a ton of time. So I started doing my drawings on Post-it notes just as a way to start getting back into the habit and to start working on doing some drawings and figure out what it is I wanted to be doing and what type of stuff I was interested in, and just getting back into it. So I started on Post-it notes, and then from there I moved into the artist trading cards. And at the time, I was doing it because it was necessary for me at that time, because I didn't have a ton of extra time, but I figured I could find 5 minutes to do a quick sketch on a Post-it note. So I got in the habit of working small like that, and then I started doing the artist trading cards. But they're nice because you can put them in a binder. There's sleeves that they fit into that are actually made for like baseball cards and those sorts of cards. But the artist trading cards are the same size, so they'll fit in there. But you can make a nice little portfolio that just fits in the binder. But there's groups where you can trade your drawings with other artists for their artwork. And I've always enjoyed doing that. I've been doing it for, probably 30 years now. And I really enjoy it. So I had known about the artist trading cards because I've been involved in it for a while. But I had never considered doing the artist trading cards just as a time saver and for the purposes of building out a portfolio. And when I say portfolio, I mean just sort of a collection of my artwork. I'm not trying to make a living with my art. I make my artwork strictly as a way to relax, and it's just something I enjoy doing. I consider myself to be a hobby artist because I'm doing it for myself. I'm not doing it for other people. I'm not trying to get commission work or anything like that. So doing the artist trading cards really fits in with what I'm doing and what my goals are. So all I'm doing, simple outline, just going around, going right over top of the lines that I want to keep. And then I'm just doing some, you can do some hatching, cross hatching, whatever it is you want to do, just to give it a little more details, make it a little more interesting, break up the colors a little bit. And you can go in and darken up some of your outline if you want to, instead of having it all just one consistent line weight all the way around. You can go back in with the pen and add some darker, some thicker lines where there would be shadows at. It makes it look a little more interesting. So that's it for the outline. And then the next thing is to use a bigger eraser. And you can use either these pink pearl erasers, work good. I've been using this black one. I like it because it's a little messy, but as you erase, it flakes off so you don't get the smudges on your artwork that the pink erasers tend to leave behind sometimes. So you just can go right over top of everything, get rid of all those pencil lines. And then the next thing we want to do is to grab some markers or whatever you want to use for color. I'm going to use markers, so I'm going to go grab some colors that I want to use, and I'll be right back to do some color. All right, so I got some colors set aside, some different markers, and what I do is when I make my artist trading cards, when I cut them out, there's little pieces of cardstock left over. So what I do is I test my markers on these little scrap papers to see what colors are going to go together. I typically use 2 or 3 colors for all of my drawings. And the reason for this is to add a little bit of depth. If you color something in just one solid color, it'll tend to look flat. And you can change that. You can make it look less flat by using a couple of colors. So you could use 2 colors and just have sort of your main, like your mid-tone color. And then you could do a darker color for your shadows, for your darker areas, and then just use white for your highlight. Or you could use 3 markers and do your lighter color, your mid-tone, and your darker value. I typically use just 2 colors partially because on the artist trading cards, sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense to try to get in there with 3 different colors. Or, you know, three different markers. And by using the 2 colors, you can get away from that flat look. So what I did was I usually lay down that main color and then I'll go back over the darker areas with a darker color. And how you do this is up to you. There's a lot of different ways that you can add in your shadow areas and the darker areas. It's really just going to depend on what your personal style is. And this marker's not too much different from that main color. It's probably a little bit hard to see on camera. It's a little bit subtle. I like my values to be subtle in the differences so I can blend them together. And it's up to you. You could always go back in with, again, with the third color and go over and make it even darker yet. And I think this one's probably, see if I can, trying to find a marker that's a little darker yet. So this one would be even darker. So it's kind of just a personal preference of how much variation you want between your colors, if you want them to be more similar or if you would rather there was more contrast between them. And this marker, by the way, is terrible for this small of a drawing, but it's the color I wanted, so. And when you're using your markers, so these are all alcohol-based markers, and you can mix and match brands as long as they're all alcohol-based. These touch markers with this bullet tip or fine tip, whatever you want to call it, are a lot nicer for the artist trading cards. But I do have the Prismacolors are ones that I bought probably, I don't know, 15 years ago or so when I first started experimenting with using markers. And they're still good, they still work, so I'm going to keep using them until they're all dried up. But they're definitely not as easy to use. They tend to go out of the lines a little too much. And it's all, part of it is having control over the marker and all that, but definitely they are not the best markers for this type of work. The tips that are on them are not. And this marker, so a lot of the markers have dual tip, and normally I'd be using the smaller end for this. However, this marker is starting to run out. Well, it's not starting to run out. It's kind of towards the end of its life cycle here. So a lot of times if you switch and use the bigger tip on the marker, you can get more life out of it. The pigment tends to go to the larger end, or I don't know why it's usable on the bigger end but not on the smaller, to be honest. But all I know is if you flip it over and use the big end, then you can get a little more use out of it. So just use that up until it's got nothing left to give and toss it and grab a new one. But as I was saying earlier, you can mix and match brands. You really just need to experiment and play around. The brand that you use, if you're not doing illustration work, then I don't think it's super important to worry about what brand you're using. I know a lot of people like Copic markers. They're a bit too pricey for me personally. Like I said, I'm just a hobby artist, just doing this for fun, just for my own personal enjoyment. So for me, going with Copic markers aren't really, I don't think it justifies the cost for what I'm doing. If I was doing commission work, illustration work, maybe it would be a different story, but most of these, they'll either just stay in my portfolio or I'll end up trading them to other artists for their artwork. So that's it for the can itself. And then the next thing is two things. We can add a background to it, which I'm going to do because right now we just got a floating can. And then the other thing is to add some white highlights. And I'll go ahead and show you that now. So I like using these jelly rolls. They work really well over top of the marker. And you may have to wait for the marker to dry a little bit more. But they show up really nicely. And the reason I say you might have to let them dry a little bit first, if your marker's still really wet, then the jelly roll will tend to soak into the marker. Not a big deal if that happens. Then you can just go right back over top of it again, let it dry for a little bit, and then just go ahead and go right back over top of it. And all I'm doing is just breaking up the solid areas of color. Again, this is just how you do it as part of your own style. You should be doing whatever you think looks right. I don't worry too much about being proper with my light source and where's my light source coming from. I'm not worrying about all of that in this type of drawing. So the next thing is to add some kind of a background on this. So I'm going to go grab some other markers, kind of decide what type of background I want to have on here, and then I will be back to finish up the background with you. I went ahead and finished up this guy off camera. I added in the background, I chose a couple of different purple markers, a lighter, kind of a pinkish purple, and then a little bit darker purple. I wanted a bit more contrast with those colors, so I chose ones that were a little further apart in the spectrum, just to add some contrast in the background. So there's a million different ways you could do your backgrounds. This is just one of them. But this guy's done. He's finished. And what I like to do is a series of 7 drawings. So I call it a 7-day challenge or a 7-day theme or a daily theme, daily challenge, where I do one a day for the week. And then the next week I just pick a different theme. And that's one of the reasons why I really like doing my drawings on artist trading cards. But I'm going to show you some different examples of things that I've tried doing these little graffiti spray can drawings. So just playing around with different colors, different styles, different way to do the can itself, the faces. There's a lot of different ways you can add variation to your drawings. And you're only going to really figure those things out just by doing it, experimenting. And that's where the artist trading cards really come in handy, because they save a lot of time. So, but you can do little sprays in the background. You can do your backgrounds where they're more complicated. You can simplify them. So if I look at these two, their backgrounds are similar and the cans are similar, but I changed how I did the colors. The face is pretty much the same. I changed the way I did the teeth a little bit. The backgrounds are similar, but I tried this one outlining it in blue. That one I did it in blacks and grays. But there's just a lot of really easy ways that you can make some small changes. So these two are very similar. Background slightly different with the colors, and the way I did the eyes were different. This one I colored the iris of the eyes, where this one I colored where the white of the eyes would be. So you can have things that are similar and make just subtle changes, and it'll change the overall look and feel of your artwork. So I hope you enjoyed this, and my goal here is really just to inspire you to work on your own drawings, and also to explore the different options in the small changes you can make and the different things you can do to your drawings to make them unique and original. I will catch you in the next video. Have a great day. So how did you do? Hopefully you followed along with the tutorial and worked on your own artwork. If you enjoyed this and you want to get notified of other lessons that are coming up in the future, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and you'll get notified whenever something new gets uploaded. Have a good day and happy creating!